Part 1. She buried him. Then his number called her. 3 days after the funeral, Vivian Hale was still wearing her engagement ring. She knew she should probably take it off. Talia had suggested it once, carefully, as if she were suggesting something dangerous. Vivian had pretended not to hear her, so the ring remained on her finger. It was a simple band with a small diamond Adrian had chosen because, according to him, anything larger would make her hand look too expensive. She had laughed when he'd said it. Now she couldn't look at it for more than a few seconds without feeling sick. Vivian sat cross-legged on the bedroom floor, surrounded by pieces of the life she'd shared with him. Adrian's gray sweater was folded beside her. She'd washed it twice since his death. It still smelled faintly like him. Or maybe that was her imagination. She didn't know anymore. A boarding pass lay beneath one of the bedroom drawers. They had bought the tickets for a trip they never took. There was a birthday card with Adrian's handwriting across the front, the letters slanting slightly, because he'd always written too quickly. She had kept everything. The ridiculous things. The important things. The things that meant nothing to anyone else. The house was quiet. Not peaceful. Just quiet. Vivian picked up Adrian's phone. It was still charged. She had been keeping it charged since the funeral, even though she knew there was no reason to. She scrolled through their messages again. She had read them so many times that she could remember entire conversations without looking. Arguments about groceries. Pictures of badly cooked dinners. His complaints about traffic. Her messages telling him to stop buying expensive coffee. And their last conversation. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that sounded like a goodbye. Just, home by 8. Don't wait up. Love you. He never made it home by 8. Vivian stared at those words. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She wanted to send something back. Anything. She almost typed, I miss you. Then she deleted it. She knew he wouldn't answer. She pressed the screen until it went black. Her own reflection appeared in the glass. Swollen eyes. Dry lips. Hair she'd stopped bothering to brush properly. She looked older than she had 3 weeks ago. She set Adrian's phone on the nightstand. Then her own phone buzzed. Vivian almost ignored it. Her mother had been calling constantly. Talia had also developed a habit of checking on her every few hours and inventing excuses to come over. But something made Vivian glance at the screen. Her stomach dropped. The name displayed above the notification was Adrian. She stared at it. For several seconds, her brain simply refused to accept what her eyes were seeing. No, it wasn't possible. She blinked. The name was still there. Adrian. She reached for the phone. Her fingers were already shaking. She opened the message. There were 6 words. Vivian, don't trust my brother. She stopped breathing. She read it again. Then again. Her eyes moved to the name at the top. Adrian. No. Someone had to be doing this. Someone had cloned his number. Someone had his phone. Someone had found a way to make the message appear under his name. That was all. There had to be an explanation. She repeated that to herself as if it were a prayer. Then another message appeared. I'm not where they told you I am. Vivian's hand went numb. The phone almost slipped from her fingers. No. The word came out quietly. She looked around the room. There was no one there. She was alone. She told herself it was a cruel joke. Someone had decided that a grieving woman was an easy target. Someone had found Adrian's number and wanted to hurt her. But then why that message? I'm not where they told you I am. Where else was he supposed to be? She had watched the coffin being lowered. She had stood beside his grave. She had heard the priest say his name. She had listened while people told her how sorry they were. She had buried Adrian. Her thumb moved to the call button. She didn't think. She just pressed it. 1 ring. 2. 3. The call connected. Vivian said nothing. Neither did the person on the other end. Then she heard breathing. Slow. Steady. Someone was there. Someone was listening. Hello. Her voice cracked. Who is this? Nothing. Please. Still nothing. She pressed the phone harder against her ear. Is this some kind of sick joke? The breathing continued. Then the call ended. Vivian stared at the screen. For the first time since Adrian died, she wasn't crying. Something else had taken its place. Fear. And 3 days earlier, she had never imagined that the dead would be the ones to frighten her. Hey, welcome back to Silver S Dramas. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because this story is about to take you somewhere you will not see coming. And trust me, by the time we reach the end of part 1, you are going to have questions about almost everyone in this story. Now let's go back 3 days. Because before that message arrived, Vivian believed she knew exactly how Adrian Cross had died. She was wrong. Vivian had spent 6 years falling asleep beside Adrian Cross. 6 years of ordinary mornings. Late-night conversations. Arguments over stupid things. Grocery shopping. Long drives. Bad movies. And hundreds of little moments that didn't seem important until they were gone. Adrian had money. A lot of it. His family owned businesses across the city, had connections in places Vivian didn't understand, and moved through expensive rooms as if they belonged there. But Adrian himself never seemed particularly impressed by any of it. He was messy. He burned food. He forgot appointments. He once spent 20 minutes searching for his phone while talking on it. He also remembered things nobody else did. He remembered Vivian's favorite childhood song. He remembered the name of the teacher who had embarrassed her in high school. He even remembered the name of her childhood goldfish. Vivian had once asked him how. He shrugged. I listen when you talk. That answer had meant more to her than any expensive gift ever could. Adrian proposed on a Tuesday. He had actually chosen Tuesday on purpose. Tuesdays never get proposals, he told her. Why? Because nobody expects anything good to happen on Tuesday. She laughed. So you're proposing because you're trying to make Tuesday interesting? Exactly. The proposal itself was a disaster. Adrian had planned a rooftop dinner. Candles. Flowers. A string quartet. He had even arranged for the restaurant to serve Vivian's favorite dessert. Unfortunately, the musicians got lost. Then Adrian dropped the ring. They spent several minutes crawling around the rooftop with their phone flashlights, searching between the wooden boards. Vivian was laughing so hard she could barely breathe. This is the worst proposal in history. Adrian was on his knees beside her. He looked at her and smiled. The worst would be if you said no. She didn't. She said yes before he had even finished asking. Later that night, they sat on the rooftop eating cold appetizers because neither of them wanted to go back downstairs. Vivian remembered that night clearly. She remembered the city lights, the cold air, Adrian's hand wrapped around hers. She remembered thinking, this is my life now. They planned their wedding for the fall. Vivian had a folder on her laptop called OURS. Inside were dress ideas, venue pictures, guest lists, photographs of flowers, and 17 different shades of ivory. Talia had once stared at the folder and said, these are all white. Vivian had protested. They're different. They are literally the same color. They're ivory. They're white. You're impossible. And yet you made me your maid of honor. Vivian smiled. Unfortunately, Adrian's contribution to the wedding planning was mostly opinions about cake. He had tried to learn their first dance on guitar. He couldn't play guitar. After 3 failed attempts, Vivian banned him from practicing. He also once called her from a florist shop. There are 40 shades of white in this place. So, I don't know which one is the correct white. There isn't a correct white. That's what someone who doesn't understand weddings would say. Vivian laughed. Just pick one. I can't. They're testing me. She had laughed so hard that she'd nearly dropped her phone. That was Adrian. Warm. Funny. A little ridiculous. And completely hers. Until she noticed something changing. His older brother, Damien Cross, had always been different. Where Adrian was easygoing, Damien was controlled. Where Adrian talked too much, Damien rarely spoke unless he had something worth saying. He ran most of the family's business interests and had a reputation for being difficult to impress. People listened when Damien entered a room. Vivian had known him for 6 years. She still wasn't sure she understood him, but she knew he loved Adrian. Their relationship was complicated. They argued. They disagreed. Sometimes they didn't speak for days. But if Adrian needed Damien, Damien came. And if Damien needed Adrian, Adrian was there. Talia didn't trust the relationship. They're close, she once said over dinner. Vivian looked at her. That's a strange thing to say. No, I'm serious. Talia pointed toward the brothers. They're close like 2 people who survived something together. What does that mean? I don't know. You just said it. I said it because it sounded intelligent. Vivian laughed. Talia stole a dumpling from her plate. I contain multitudes. You've used that line 3 times. And it's still true. 6 weeks before the wedding, the 4 of them had dinner at Damien's townhouse. The evening began normally. Talia talked. Adrian laughed. Vivian tried to convince Talia not to steal food from everyone else's plate. Even Damien seemed relaxed. Then Adrian's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. He didn't answer. It buzzed again. This time he stood. I'll be right back. He walked onto the balcony. Vivian watched him through the glass. His posture changed. His shoulders tightened. He ran a hand through his hair. She knew that gesture. Adrian was worried. Then she looked at Damien. He was watching his brother. Not with surprise. With recognition. As though he'd been expecting the call. Adrian returned a few minutes later. He sat down. Vivian looked at him. Everything okay? Fine. You sure? Work. He smiled. But it came a second too late. She noticed. She didn't know what it meant. Not yet. The changes continued. Adrian began carrying his phone everywhere. Bathroom. Kitchen. Bedroom. He stopped leaving it on the counter. He started taking calls outside. Sometimes Vivian would walk into a room, and he would immediately lower his voice. Then he'd smile. Nothing. He also started disappearing. An hour here. 3 hours there. One night. He came home with scraped knuckles. Vivian noticed immediately. What happened? Gym. She stared at him. You hate the gym. I've changed. You've avoided the gym for 6 years. I'm becoming healthier. She didn't smile. Adrian. He kissed her forehead. It's nothing. But she knew it wasn't. Talia noticed too. That's not a gym injury. How would you know? Because I've seen you fall off a treadmill. I've never fallen off a treadmill. Exactly. Vivian laughed. But the concern remained. One night, while they were folding laundry, Adrian suddenly spoke. If anything happens to me. Vivian looked up. He was holding one of his shirts. What? He didn't look at her. If anything happens to me, don't automatically trust everyone around me. She stared. Why are you saying that? Just promise me. Adrian. Promise. She tried to laugh. Nothing is going to happen to you. He didn't laugh. Vivian put down the shirt. What are you investigating? He went still. For a moment, she thought he might tell her. Then he looked away. Nothing you need to worry about. You're lying. I know. That answer scared her more than if he'd denied it. She stepped closer. Please tell me. Adrian looked at her. There was exhaustion in his eyes. I'll explain everything. When? Soon. He kissed her forehead. She let him. She believed him. 2 weeks later, Adrian Cross was dead. The official story was simple. Car accident. Coastal road. Just after midnight. His car had gone through a guardrail. The weather wasn't particularly bad, but investigators found enough to blame the crash on the road conditions. Vivian received the call at 1:47 in the morning. She remembered the exact moment her knees stopped holding her up. She remembered the kitchen floor. She remembered her mother's voice on the phone. After that, everything became a blur. The funeral was held on a gray Tuesday, the same day Adrian had proposed. Vivian noticed that detail and almost laughed. It felt cruel. The church filled with people. Business associates. Friends. Relatives she'd never met. Men who shook her hand and told her how sorry they were. Talia stayed beside her. Every time someone said something meaningless, Talia's jaw tightened. Finally, she whispered, if one more person says he's in a better place, I'm going to get arrested. Vivian almost smiled. Damien handled the arrangements. Flowers. Caterers. Phone calls. Paperwork. Everything. He stood beside Vivian during the funeral. The casket remained closed. She'd been told the accident had made an open casket impossible. She hadn't questioned it. She couldn't. She was barely functioning. But Damien looked different. He wasn't simply grieving. He kept looking around. At the doors. At the crowd. At his phone. He looked like a man expecting someone to arrive. After the funeral, Vivian stood beside him at the grave. What happened to him? Damien looked at the headstone. It was an accident. He didn't look at her. Vivian watched his jaw tighten. You don't believe that. His eyes finally met hers. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He looked away. We need to go. Vivian stared at him. Something was wrong. She didn't know what. But she knew it. For 3 days after the funeral, Vivian barely functioned. Talia moved into the guest room without asking. She made sure Vivian ate. She made sure she showered. She made sure she didn't spend every hour alone. On the third night, Talia tried to cook. It went badly. The smoke detector started screaming. Vivian looked toward the kitchen. What are you doing? Making soup. That isn't soup. It's becoming soup. Something is burning. That's flavor. Vivian laughed. It was small. Barely there. But it was the first real laugh she'd had since Adrian died. Talia smiled. There she is. Later that night, Vivian went back into the bedroom. She sat on the floor among Adrian's things. Then her phone buzzed. She looked down. Adrian. Her heart stopped. The message appeared. Vivian, don't trust my brother. Then, I'm not where they told you I am. She called. Breathing. Silence. The call ended. Vivian didn't sleep. She sat awake until morning. She tried to find a rational explanation. First, she called the phone company. They told her they couldn't release certain account information without documentation. She called Felix, an old college friend who worked in IT. Can someone fake a phone number? Yes. Could they make it appear as Adrian? If they have enough access. Could it be random? Felix frowned. Who is texting you? Vivian hesitated. No one. Viv. It's nothing. He didn't believe her. Neither did she. But she wasn't ready to say it. Because once she said, Adrian is texting me, it would become real. Instead, she tried to convince herself it was a prank. Someone cruel. Someone who had found his number. Someone who knew she was vulnerable. That explanation worked for a few days. Then another message arrived. It came at 11 in the morning. Vivian was standing in the kitchen. Her coffee had already gone cold. The message appeared. You still keep the porch light on. He used to complain about the electric bill. The mug slipped from her hand. Coffee spilled across the floor. Vivian didn't move. Nobody knew that. Nobody. Adrian had complained about the porch light for 2 years. Every night. She always left it on because she liked coming home to a lit house. He used to call it a waste of electricity. She used to tell him he was cheap. It was their argument. A stupid little argument. Something only the two of them knew. Vivian typed, "Who are you?" The response came almost immediately. "You already know me." She sat on the floor. And for the first time, she allowed herself to think the impossible. Could Adrian really be alive? The thought terrified her. Because if he was alive, then everything she'd been through was built on a lie. The funeral, the grave, the condolences, the nights she'd spent crying. All of it. And she didn't know whether she wanted the answer. 3 days later, Talia confronted her. Okay, we're done pretending this is normal. Vivian looked up. What? These messages. Talia sat across from her. Dead men don't text. I know. So either Adrian is alive. Vivian swallowed. Or someone has his phone. Exactly. Talia leaned forward. And either option is bad. What do you think? I think we find out what Adrian was investigating. Vivian stared at her. You think his death wasn't an accident? I do. Why? Because your dead fiancé keeps warning you about his brother. Vivian couldn't argue. So they started looking. By the following weekend, Vivian's living room looked like a crime scene. Talia had bought a whiteboard. Names covered it. Dates. Questions. Photographs. A red string connected 2 unrelated pieces of information that Talia insisted were connected. Vivian stared at it. We look insane. We look organized. You wrote Damien? With 4 question marks. The situation deserves 4. Talia stepped back. See? Organized. Vivian shook her head. But she smiled. They began with the accident report. The first problem was the location. Adrian's car had been found almost a mile away from the route he normally took home. There was no obvious reason for him to have been there. They drove out there themselves. Near the crash site was a gas station. The night clerk was named Ronnie. He became nervous the moment they mentioned Adrian. I already told the police everything. Talia smiled. You told them 2 different things. Ronnie stopped moving. Which one was true? He glanced at the security camera, then at them. I saw a car go off the road. That's not what you told the police the first time. Silence. Who asked you to change your statement? Ronnie's face tightened. You should leave. Talia's smile disappeared. Why? Just go. They left. But they had learned something important. Ronnie was afraid. And fear was difficult to explain away. They discovered that the gas station's security footage had been deleted. Corrupted, according to the official report. Conveniently corrupted. Then they looked through Adrian's financial records. Vivian found a large cash withdrawal. 2 days before his death. She showed Talia. Talia stared at the amount. That's a lot of cash. Why would he need that much? I don't know. Vivian searched Adrian's office again. That's when she noticed the drawer. It was slightly crooked. Adrian never left drawers crooked. She pulled it open. Nothing. But something was wrong. Someone had searched the office. They had put everything back. Almost. Talia crouched beside the desk. Who has a key? Vivian already knew. Damien. Neither of them spoke. The name sat between them. Then Vivian's phone buzzed. Another message. He lied to you about the night I died. She stared at it. Then typed. Who lied? No response. 2 days later. Ask him what he was really investigating. Ask him why he stopped trusting his own brother. Vivian read it again. Damien. It had to be about Damien. She checked Adrian's company records. There it was. Damien had canceled a regular Tuesday night meeting on the exact night Adrian died. He had attended that meeting every week for almost a year. Except that night. Vivian showed Talia. I'm not saying he killed Adrian. Talia nodded. But it's strange. Very. He doesn't miss meetings. Talia leaned back. Okay, but think about it. What? If Damien killed Adrian, why would he keep protecting you? Vivian looked at her. He might not be protecting me. Then what is he doing? I don't know. Talia sighed. That's the problem. All right, pause for a second. If you're already suspicious of Damien, hit that like button. Subscribe now. And tell me in the comments. Do you think Damien killed Adrian? Or is he hiding something for a completely different reason? Because we're about to reach the point where Vivian finally comes face to face with Damien about what he's been hiding. Let's get back into it. 2 nights later, Vivian came home and immediately knew something was wrong. The front door was unlocked. She stopped. Her keys were still in her hand. She didn't move for several seconds. Then she pushed the door open. The apartment looked normal. Too normal. Nothing was broken. Nothing was overturned. The jewelry was still there. The cash was still in the kitchen drawer. But something had changed. She walked into the bedroom. The closet door was closed. Adrian always left it slightly open. She opened it. Her stomach dropped. The laptop was gone. The one she'd taken from Adrian's office. The one she hadn't opened. The one she'd hidden at the back of the closet because some part of her had been afraid of what she might find. Someone had come specifically for it. Vivian grabbed her phone. She tried calling Talia. No answer. She tried again. Then headlights swept across the living room. A car stopped outside. A knock came at the door. Vivian froze. Then the door opened. Damien. He stepped inside. His eyes immediately went to the windows. Then the balcony. Then the hallway. Are you hurt? Vivian stared at him. How did you know? He looked at her. I was nearby. I didn't call you. Silence. How did you know? Damien's jaw tightened. I have a security alert on this apartment. Vivian stared. You've been monitoring me? Since Adrian died. Why? Because I didn't trust the people around him. You didn't trust the people around him? No. Did you trust Adrian? Damien's eyes hardened. More than anyone. Vivian stepped closer. Someone broke into my apartment. I know. They took his laptop. Damien went still. That reaction told her everything. He knew something. You knew about the laptop. I knew it was important. How? He didn't answer. Vivian's voice shook. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was trying to keep you alive. She stared at him. Then tell me the truth. Damien looked at her. For the first time, his expression broke. Leave it alone. What? The accident. Why? Because the truth will hurt you more than his death already has. His voice cracked. Please, Vivian. She couldn't tell whether he was threatening her or begging her. Maybe both. And that frightened her. Something else began happening. Something Vivian didn't want. She started noticing Damien. Not the businessman. Not Adrian's older brother. The man underneath. It happened slowly. They spent more time together because of the investigation. They looked through photographs. Old documents. Adrian's records. And sometimes Damien talked about his brother. One night, he told her about a childhood disaster. Adrian had been 9. Damien had been 12. Adrian had convinced him to help build a submarine out of their father's luggage and a garden hose. The experiment failed. They flooded the pool house. Both boys were grounded. Vivian laughed. You actually did that? Damien smiled. A real smile. Yes. She stared at him. I've never seen you smile like that. His smile disappeared. I don't do it often. You should. He looked at her. You sound like Adrian. That hurt. Vivian looked away. I'm sorry. You don't have to be. They sat in silence. Then Damien said, he was the only person who ever made me feel like I didn't have to be. He stopped. What? Nothing. It matters. Damien looked at her. For a moment, the distance between them disappeared. Vivian suddenly realized how close they were sitting. She could hear his breathing. He looked at her mouth. Then her eyes. He stood abruptly. I should go. But he didn't. He stayed another 20 minutes. When he finally left, Vivian sat alone at the table. She hated herself for the thought that had entered her mind. She was beginning to want Damien. Not as Adrian's brother. As a man. And she felt guilty. A few nights later, Vivian couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling until 3 in the morning. Then she texted Damien. She didn't expect him to answer. 20 minutes later, there was a knock. He stood outside with 2 coffees. How did you know I wanted coffee? I didn't. They sat on the fire escape. The city was quiet. Vivian stared at the street below. Does it ever get quieter? Damien looked at her. The noise in your head. She nodded. He thought for a moment. I don't know yet. He looked down at his coffee. I've had 3 weeks. Then he smiled sadly. Ask me again in 3 years. Vivian smiled. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. There was no executive voice. No controlled expression. Just a man who was grieving his brother. She thought about Talia. You're allowed to feel something other than devastated. That doesn't make you a bad person. Vivian wasn't sure she believed it. But she knew one thing. She was falling for Damien. And that terrified her. Because if Adrian was really alive, then she had no idea what that meant. And if he was dead, she didn't know whether falling for his brother made her a traitor. Before we go any further, I want your theory. Who do you trust more right now, Damien or the mystery person texting Vivian? Drop it in the comments. And hit the subscribe button if you are enjoying the story. Because the next scene is where everything changes. 3 weeks after the funeral, Vivian finally opened Adrian's backup laptop. She had found it buried inside an old moving box. The thief had taken the main laptop. They hadn't known about this one. Vivian almost didn't open it. She sat at the kitchen table for nearly 2 hours. The laptop was closed in front of her. She knew Adrian's passwords. Or at least she thought she did. She tried one. Wrong. Another. Wrong. Then she remembered something. A ridiculous nickname he'd given her childhood goldfish. She typed it after the date of their first date. The laptop unlocked. Vivian stared at the screen. Her heart was pounding. She searched through the files. Nothing. Invoices. Documents. Travel receipts. Old photographs. Then she found a folder. It was hidden inside another folder. The file name looked boring. Invoice_final_V3. She opened it. There was one video. Vivian stared at it. Her hand hovered over the mouse. Then she clicked. Adrian's face appeared. Vivian stopped breathing. It was him. Alive. Not a photograph. Not a memory. Him. He looked thinner than she remembered. His face was pale. His eyes were tired. And he kept looking over his shoulder. As if he was afraid someone might walk in. Vivian covered her mouth. Adrian. He looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this. His voice was quiet. Urgent. Then they succeeded. He looked behind him. Then back at the camera. Everyone thinks I'm. The video stopped. Vivian froze. No. She clicked it again. 9 seconds. That's all. 9 seconds of Adrian alive. 9 seconds recorded after the world believed he was dead. She played it again. And again. Nothing. The rest of the video was gone. Then her phone buzzed. Vivian looked down. One message. Don't show Damien this video. Her blood ran cold. She looked toward the doorway. Damien was standing there. She hadn't heard him enter. He stared at her. What did you find? Vivian slammed the laptop shut. Nothing. Damien took one step closer. Vivian. Her phone buzzed again. She looked down. Another message. He's already in the room with you. She froze. Slowly, she looked up. Damien was still standing there. The last month came rushing back. The key. The office. The missing laptop. The strange meeting. The security system. The way he'd arrived too quickly. His warning. His insistence that she stop investigating. But then she remembered the fire escape. The coffee. The way his voice had broken when he talked about Adrian. The way he had looked at her. The way she had started falling for him. What if Adrian had been warning her about Damien all along? Vivian. Damien stepped closer. What did you find? She couldn't answer. He reached toward her. His hand stopped inches from her arm. The room was silent. Outside, a car alarm chirped twice. Then stopped. Vivian looked down at the laptop. 9 seconds of Adrian's face burned in her mind. 9 seconds that proved one thing. Something about his death was a lie. But she didn't know who was lying. Damien? The mystery sender? Or Adrian himself? She looked at Damien. He was waiting. And she realized something that frightened her more than anything else. If Damien was the man Adrian had warned her about, she had already fallen for him. And if he wasn't, then someone else was watching her. Someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Someone who knew exactly when she was alone. Someone who knew when Damien entered the room. The phone was still in her hand. The message was still on the screen. He's already in the room with you. Vivian said nothing. Damien took another step. Vivian. She looked at him. For the first time, she couldn't decide whether she wanted him closer or farther away. The man she had started to trust was standing in front of her. The dead man she loved was speaking through a 9-second video. And somewhere outside that room, someone was waiting to see what she would do next. Vivian tightened her grip on the phone. She didn't answer Damien. She couldn't. Because whatever happened next would decide whether she was being protected or hunted. The question isn't just whether Adrian is alive anymore. The question is, who wanted everyone to believe he was dead? Who has been sending Vivian those messages? Why did Adrian warn her about his own brother? Why was Damien watching her apartment? And why was someone desperate enough to steal Adrian's laptop, but leave everything else behind? Most importantly, if Damien really is protecting Vivian, why did Adrian tell her not to trust him? And if Damien is the person Adrian was warning her about, how long has he been hiding the truth? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if you want to find out what happens when Vivian finally confronts Damien with Adrian's video, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. Because from here, nothing is going to be what Vivian thinks it is. What did you just find? Damien's voice stopped Vivian cold. He stood in the doorway of her apartment, staring at her. She still had one hand pressed against Adrian's laptop. Her phone lay beside it. The last message was still on the screen. He's already in the room with you. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Vivian looked at Damien and suddenly remembered everything she'd spent the last month trying not to think about. The way he'd reacted whenever she mentioned Adrian's accident. The way he'd watched her phone whenever it buzzed. The way he'd somehow appeared at her apartment shortly after the break-in. The way he'd kept telling her to stop digging. She had wanted to believe he was protecting her. But now she wasn't sure. Did you know? Damien's expression changed. Know what? Did you know Adrian was going to disappear? He didn't answer. That silence was enough. Vivian felt her stomach turn. Damien. He looked away. Yes. The word was quiet, but it hit her harder than she expected. You knew? I knew he was planning something. You knew he was planning to disappear. Yes. You stood beside me at his funeral. I know. You watched me bury him. I know. Her voice rose. You watched me cry over him when you knew there was a chance he wasn't even dead. I didn't know he was dead. Vivian stopped. Damien stepped farther into the room. I knew Adrian was planning to disappear. I knew he'd prepared another identity. I knew he had a plan to leave. He swallowed. I did not know there would be a car accident. Vivian stared at him. Then what did you think was going to happen? I thought he'd disappear. And you thought I was just supposed to carry on? No. Then why didn't you tell me? Because he made me promise. Vivian laughed bitterly. Of course he did. She turned away. Everybody has a promise. Adrian had a promise. You had a promise. Apparently, I'm the only person in this story who wasn't allowed to know what was happening. Vivian. No. She turned back. I want the truth. Damien looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay. Vivian pointed toward the chair. Sit down. Damien did. She sat opposite him. Start from the beginning. Damien rested his elbows on his knees. For once, he didn't look like the controlled businessman Vivian had known for 6 years. He looked tired. Really tired. About 6 months ago, Adrian found something. What? I don't know everything. That's not an answer. I know. He rubbed his hands together. Adrian discovered financial records connected to some of our family's businesses. Money was moving through accounts that shouldn't have been connected. Money laundering? Something close to it. Vivian frowned. How close? Close enough that people could go to prison. She stared at him. And who was doing it? That's what Adrian was trying to find out. Damien paused. He believed someone close to our family was involved. Vivian immediately thought about Adrian's behavior. The phone calls. The scraped knuckles. The cash withdrawal. The nights he disappeared. The way he'd stopped leaving his phone around. All of it suddenly made sense. He was investigating them. Yes. And someone found out. Eventually. When Adrian came to me 2 months before he died. Vivian looked up. What did he say? He told me he'd found something serious. He said if the wrong people realized how much he knew, they would come after him. And you believed him? I did. Damien looked down. I should have taken it more seriously. You did. No. His voice hardened. I helped him prepare to disappear. I didn't stop him from putting himself in danger. What did you do? I helped him create another identity. New documents. A new bank account. A place to go. Vivian stared at him. You helped him fake his death? That was the plan. Her heart hammered. So the accident was never part of it. Damien looked at her. Adrian was supposed to leave quietly. Then why is there a grave with his name on it? Damien didn't answer. Vivian felt cold. Whose body was buried? I don't know. She stared at him. You don't know? No. How could you not know? Because by the time I found out about the accident, everything had already been taken out of my hands. Vivian stood. She paced toward the window. You knew Adrian was going to disappear. Yes. You helped him. Yes. And then suddenly there's an accident. Yes. And you still don't know who was in that car. Damien's face tightened. No. Vivian turned toward him. Then someone took Adrian's plan and used it against him. That's what I've been afraid of. She sat again. What happened the last time you saw him? Damien looked away. We argued. About what? I can't tell you yet. Vivian's frustration returned. You're doing it again. I'm trying to keep you safe. You don't get to use that every time you don't want to tell me something. Damien nodded. You're right. He looked at her. But I genuinely don't know enough yet to tell you the whole story. Then tell me what you do know. I will. He paused. But I need to understand some of it first. Vivian wanted to scream. Instead, she said, how long did you know about the plan? 2 months. She stared at him. 2 months. I know. You watched me plan a wedding for 2 months. Yes. You knew there was a possibility Adrian would disappear. Yes. And you said nothing. Damien looked down. I thought I was doing what he asked. Vivian's anger softened slightly. Not because she forgave him. She didn't. But because for the first time she could see how trapped he had been too. You didn't fail me, she said. Damien looked up. You lied to me. She held his gaze. That's different. A faint smile touched his mouth. Fair. The next morning, Talia was furious. Wait. She stood in the middle of Vivian's living room with a cup of coffee. Start again. Vivian sighed. Damien knew Adrian was planning to disappear. Okay. He helped him. Talia's eyebrows rose. Okay. He helped him fake his death. Talia lowered the coffee. And you're telling me this like that's normal? No. Good. Talia started pacing. Because I'm trying very hard not to lose my mind. Vivian almost smiled. You're doing fine. I'm not. Talia pointed toward the whiteboard. Look at this. Vivian followed her finger. Damien's name was still there. For question marks beside it. You remember this? Yes. You remember when we thought he was suspicious? Yes. He just confessed to helping Adrian disappear. I know. Talia stared at her. And you're still not convinced he did anything wrong? I think he's hiding something. That's not the same thing. I know. Talia took a sip of coffee, then immediately grimaced. It's cold. You've been holding it for 20 minutes. I was busy being shocked. Despite everything, Vivian laughed. Talia smiled. Then her expression became serious again. Do you believe him? Vivian thought about it. I believe he helped Adrian. Do you believe he didn't hurt him? I don't know. Talia nodded. Good. Good. Yes. Because that's the answer I wanted. She pointed at Vivian. You don't have to decide who is innocent just because you care about them. Vivian looked away. Talia noticed. That's not the only thing bothering you, is it? Vivian didn't answer. Talia's eyes narrowed. Oh. What? You like him? Vivian looked at her. Don't. You do. Talia. You like Damien. I said don't. Talia lowered her voice. Viv, I'm not judging you. Vivian swallowed. Adrian might still be alive. I know. And I'm standing here talking about his brother. I know. I feel horrible. Talia sat beside her. You don't control your feelings. Vivian stared at the floor. I don't know what I feel anymore. Talia took her hand. Then don't decide yet. For once, Vivian had no argument. That afternoon, they went over the night Adrian disappeared. Damien sat at the kitchen table with Vivian and Talia. He had brought everything he had. Maps, phone records, copies of the accident report, Adrian's old travel documents. Start with the phone call, Vivian said. Damien nodded. Adrian called me around 10 that night. What did he say? He said something had changed. Changed how? He sounded frightened. Damien looked at the report. He told me he couldn't wait 2 more weeks. 2 weeks until what? Until he disappeared. Vivian's chest tightened. So he moved the plan forward. Yes. Why? He didn't say. Where was he supposed to go? North. Damien pulled out a map. There was a private airfield about 2 hours inland. I had arranged for someone to take him somewhere safe. Vivian looked at the map. That's nowhere near the coastal road. No. Then why was he there? I don't know. Talia leaned over the table. What time did the phone stop transmitting? About 20 minutes before the accident was reported. Vivian looked at Damien. 20 minutes. Yes. That's enough time for someone to force him onto another road. That's what I've been thinking. Talia looked at the accident report. Wait. She pointed to the photograph. What's that? Vivian leaned closer. There was damage along the rear panel of Adrian's car. Debris, Damien said. That's what the report says. Talia frowned. There's no debris in this picture. Vivian looked again. She remembered the crash site. Guardrail. Road. Ocean. Nothing else. The impact mark. Damien stared at it. You think another vehicle hit him? I'm saying it should have been investigated. Maybe it was. Then why isn't it in the report? Nobody answered. The three of them sat in silence. Then Damien said, someone changed the route. Vivian looked at him. And maybe someone caused the crash. The investigation changed after that. It wasn't just about whether Adrian had been alive after the accident. Now they had to find out who had wanted him dead. And why. Damien started making calls. People Vivian had never met. People who worked in banking. People who knew the family's businesses. People who had access to records she couldn't even understand. A week later, he finally came back with something. He spread several documents across the table. Adrian found money moving through several accounts. Vivian looked at the numbers. I don't understand any of this. You don't need to. Damien pointed to the names. These accounts connect companies that aren't supposed to have anything to do with each other. Why? Because someone was moving money through them. Talia leaned forward. How much? Damien told her. Her eyes widened. That's insane. It gets worse. Damien placed another document on the table. Adrian discovered that someone inside the family was helping them. Vivian froze. Someone inside the family? Or someone close enough to the family? Who? We don't know. Damien's voice lowered. That's what Adrian and I were fighting about. Vivian looked up. You suspected someone. I did. Who? I don't know. Damien. I don't know. He rubbed his forehead. Adrian had a name in mind. He wouldn't tell me. Why? He wanted proof. And you? I thought he was being paranoid. Vivian stared at him. Until he disappeared. Yes. Then you realized he wasn't paranoid. Yes. Damien leaned back. He was right. Vivian looked at the documents. Why would they kill him if he was already planning to disappear? Damien's expression hardened. Because they discovered he knew. And they discovered I knew. Vivian's stomach dropped. Then there's me. Damien looked directly at her. Yes. The room became quiet. You think I'm a target? I think you might be. Vivian remembered the break-in. The stolen laptop. The car outside the pharmacy. The feeling that someone had been following her. She suddenly understood. That's why you've been watching my apartment. Damien nodded. I should have told you. Yes. I was trying to protect you. You keep saying that. Because it's true. 2 days later, Vivian saw the car. She had just left a pharmacy when she noticed a dark sedan parked across the street. She'd seen it before. Once outside her office. Once near a cafe where she'd met Talia. She had ignored it. This time, she didn't. She stopped. The sedan didn't move. Vivian walked toward the entrance of a nearby shop. She pretended to look through the window. Using the reflection, she watched the car. The engine was running. The driver was inside. She started walking again. The sedan pulled away. Her heart started pounding. She turned down another street. The car didn't appear. She walked faster. Then faster. By the time she reached her apartment building, her hands were shaking. She locked the door behind her. Then called Damien. He arrived 11 minutes later. He checked the windows, the locks, the hallway, then looked at her. Tell me exactly what happened. She did. When she finished, he nodded. You're not imagining it. I know. I should have told you. Yes. He looked at her. I'm sorry. She believed him. That was the problem. She believed him more than she wanted to. Talia arrived 20 minutes later. She took one look at Vivian. Someone followed you. Yes. Talia dropped her bag. Okay. She looked at Damien. Are we officially past the point where we pretend this is just an unfortunate family mystery? Damien nodded. Yes. Great. Talia rubbed her face. I hate everything. Vivian looked at the whiteboard. Then at the documents. Then at Adrian's photograph. We finish it. Talia looked at her. Finish what? What Adrian started. Damien nodded. We find out who did this. The lead came from an old property record. Damien found an address connected to a cabin outside the city. He had inherited it with Adrian years ago. Neither brother had used it in years. But Adrian had once mentioned it as a place where he could disappear if he ever needed to. They drove there on Saturday. Talia brought a baseball bat. Vivian noticed it when they were halfway there. Where did you get that? My trunk. Why do you have a baseball bat in your trunk? Why don't you? Damien glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Talia shrugged. Emergency preparedness. Vivian almost laughed. The road became narrower, then rougher. Eventually, The city disappeared behind them. No traffic. No houses. No signal. Just hills and trees. Tell me again why we're doing this, Talia said. Because Adrian might have been here. Right. She looked out the window. And if this turns into a horror movie, I want it on record that I objected. You volunteered to come, Damien said. I volunteered because Vivian shouldn't be here alone. She paused. And because I brought snacks. Damien almost smiled. Of course you did. The cabin appeared at the end of a dirt road. It looked abandoned. The front door hung open. Vivian stopped. Damien got out first. He looked around, then motioned for them to follow. Inside, dust covered almost everything. But there were footprints. Fresh ones. Vivian's stomach tightened. Someone's been here. Damien nodded. They moved slowly through the cabin. Then Vivian saw it. A gray wool jacket. She knew it immediately. Adrian's. She rushed toward it. Her fingers closed around the sleeve. There was a small tear near the cuff. The same tear he'd gotten 2 years earlier. The same jacket she'd bought him for his birthday. She pressed it against her chest. That's his. Damien stared at it. He looked shaken. Then Vivian saw something else. A watch. Adrian's watch. It was sitting on a shelf. She picked it up. The hands had stopped. Talia looked around. There's more. She had found a drawer. Inside were photographs. People meeting. Cars. Buildings. Dates. Vivian flipped through them. Then stopped. The handwriting on the back was Adrian's. She knew it immediately. He was investigating them. Damien nodded. There was one more thing beneath the photographs. A folded piece of paper. Vivian opened it. The words were written quickly, hard enough that the pen had nearly torn the paper. I had no choice. If they find me, she'll die. Vivian read it again. Then again. Her voice shook. He was talking about me. Damien didn't answer. He was staring at the floor. Vivian followed his eyes. Blood. A dark stain across the wooden boards near the back window. Her knees weakened. No. Talia covered her mouth. Oh God. Vivian sank to the floor. The jacket was still in her arms. The note was still in her hand. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that Adrian had survived the crash. He had come here. He had been hurt. And maybe, he had died here. Alone. Trying to keep her safe. She began to cry. Not the quiet tears she'd cried at the funeral. This was different. This was the grief of losing him again. The drive home was almost silent. Nobody had much to say. The photographs were in Damien's jacket. The note was wrapped carefully. Adrian's jacket lay beside Vivian. Talia reached back from the passenger seat and held Vivian's hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Damien drove. His hands were tight around the steering wheel. At one red light, he looked at Vivian through the rearview mirror. She saw something in his face she'd never seen before. Fear. Not for himself. For her. She looked away. By the time they reached her apartment, she felt completely drained. Talia went to the kitchen. Damien stayed with Vivian. Why? He looked at her. Why did you keep all of this from me? Damien sat down. Because Adrian made me promise. What promise? If something happened to him, I was supposed to protect you. You were supposed to lie to me. I was supposed to keep you alive. Vivian stared at him. He told me not to tell you everything. Why? He thought whoever was after him would come after you if they knew you had the information. She looked down. And you agreed. Yes. Even after he died? Damien shook his head. I didn't know what to do after the accident. Then why did you keep watching me? Because I knew the danger hadn't disappeared. Vivian remembered the car. The break-in. The missing laptop. The messages. You knew someone was watching me. Yes. How long? Since before the funeral. She closed her eyes. So all those times you appeared. I was trying to make sure you were safe. Why didn't you tell me? I thought telling you would make you panic. It would have. I know. He looked down. And I thought if I stayed close enough, I could protect you without forcing you into the middle of something you weren't prepared for. Vivian stared at him. You failed. I know. She almost smiled. You really don't know how to lie convincingly. Apparently not. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Then Vivian whispered. He trusted you. Damien looked at her. He trusted me with you. Damien was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I wish he had trusted me with everything else. Vivian looked at him. What do you mean? Adrian found something. You already told me. Not everything. He looked down at their hands. He suspected someone I would never have suspected. Who? I don't know. You said that. Because it's true. Damien's voice became quieter. We fought about it the last time I saw him. What did you fight about? I thought he was wrong. And now I think he might have been right. Vivian felt a chill. Why? Because he wouldn't tell me the name. Why would that matter? Because he was afraid I would confront them. Damien looked at her. He knew I would. That night, Talia went home. Vivian stayed awake. She sat on the edge of the bed with Adrian's jacket in her lap. The small tear in the sleeve caught her finger. She remembered teasing him about it. She remembered him promising to get it fixed. He never did. She looked around the room. The wedding folder was still on her laptop. The guitar was still in the corner. The sheet music was still where Adrian had left it. His life was everywhere. But he wasn't. Vivian finally allowed herself to believe the blood in that cabin meant what she thought it meant. Adrian was dead. Really dead. Whatever secret he had been running from had caught up with him. She cried until she couldn't anymore. Then she lay down. Her phone was on the nightstand. For once, it stayed silent. She closed her eyes and almost fell asleep. Then it buzzed. Vivian opened her eyes. She didn't want to look. She was tired. She couldn't do another message. But something inside her told her to reach for the phone. She picked it up. There was no text. There was a video. Vivian stared at it. Her heart began to pound. She pressed play. The screen was dark, grainy. A man's breathing came through the speaker. Then a voice. Vivian. She froze. She knew that voice. She had heard it every morning for 6 years. She had fallen asleep beside it. She had planned her wedding around it. She had cried over it at his funeral. Her fingers began to shake. The camera moved. A face slowly came into view. Vivian covered her mouth. Adrian. Alive. He looked different. His hair was longer. There was a rough beard across his face. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. A thin scar ran along his jaw. But it was him. It was Adrian. Her Adrian. Vivian couldn't breathe. The video was only a few seconds old. He looked directly into the camera. I'm sorry. His voice broke. You were never supposed to find me. Vivian's tears began falling. She reached toward the screen as if touching it could somehow make him real. The video ended. She stared at the black screen. No. She played it again. Adrian. Alive. He had survived. The grave. The funeral. The accident. Everything she believed was wrong. Then her phone buzzed. One final message. Now that you know I'm alive, you need to decide which brother you can trust. Vivian stared at the words. Damien. Adrian. One had lied to her. The other had disappeared. Both were hiding something. She looked at Adrian's jacket on the floor. Then at her phone. Her hands were shaking. The message didn't tell her which brother to trust. It only told her that one of them was dangerous. But which one? Vivian thought about Damien. His hand around hers. His promise. His warnings. The way he'd protected her. Then she thought about Adrian. The man she'd loved for 6 years. The man who had allowed her to believe he was dead. The man who had disappeared without telling her. The man who was now asking her to choose. Her phone slipped from her hand. She sat on the edge of the bed, completely still. Adrian was alive. He had been alive this entire time. And suddenly, the question wasn't whether she had lost him. The question was why he had let her believe she had. If you're still watching, tell me what you think. Who do you trust right now, Adrian or Damien? Because Vivian has just learned that Adrian is alive, but that doesn't mean he's innocent. And Damien may have lied to her, but that doesn't mean he's the villain either. So tell me in the comments. Which brother would you trust if you were Vivian? And make sure you subscribe, because part 2 is where we finally start getting answers about the person Adrian was running from. Vivian looked at the message again. Now that you know I'm alive, you need to decide which brother you can trust. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know who to call. She didn't know whether Adrian wanted her to find him or wanted her to stay away. And she didn't know what Damien would do when he discovered Adrian was alive. Outside, the city continued as normal. Cars moved through the streets. People laughed in restaurants. Lights came on in apartment windows. Nobody knew what had just happened. Nobody knew that the man they had buried was alive. Nobody knew that the woman who had spent weeks mourning him was now sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at his face on a phone screen. Vivian wiped her tears. Then she noticed something. The video. She played it again. This time, she didn't focus on Adrian's face. She watched the background. The room was dark, but behind him was something. A wall, a metal door, and a small clock. Vivian leaned closer. The clock showed a time. She looked at the message. Then the video. Her eyes narrowed. Adrian hadn't sent the video randomly. He wanted her to notice something. Something in the background. Something that could tell her where he was. She played it again. And this time she saw it. A small sign beside the door. She couldn't read it clearly, but she could make out 3 letters. MC. Vivian's heart started pounding again. She reached for her phone. Before she could call anyone, another notification appeared. Not a message. A photograph. It showed Adrian, standing beside someone. Vivian zoomed in. The photograph was blurry, but the person beside Adrian was unmistakable. Damien. Vivian stared at the screen. Her blood ran cold. The photograph had been taken recently. Very recently. Because Damien was wearing the same coat he'd worn that afternoon. And Adrian was standing beside him. Alive. Vivian's hands began to shake. If Damien knew Adrian was alive, then why had he told her he didn't? Why had he allowed her to grieve? Why had he warned her to stay away from the investigation? And if he didn't know, then who had taken the photograph? Her phone buzzed again. 1 sentence. You still don't know which brother is lying. Vivian stared at it. Then she heard something outside her apartment. Footsteps. Slow. Coming closer. She turned toward the door. The footsteps stopped. Someone was standing outside. Vivian didn't breathe. A shadow moved beneath the door. Then came 3 quiet knocks. She looked at her phone. The last message was still there. You still don't know which brother is lying. Another knock. Vivian slowly stood. She didn't know who was outside. She didn't know who she could trust. But she knew one thing. The truth was no longer somewhere far away. It was standing on the other side of her door. And whoever it was had come for her. And that is where we're ending part 1. Adrian is alive. Damien knows more than he has admitted. Someone inside the family may be involved. Someone has been following Vivian. And now someone is standing outside her apartment. But the biggest question is still unanswered. Why did Adrian let Vivian believe he was dead? And why did he tell her she had to choose between the 2 brothers? If you have your theory, put it in the comments. And subscribe, because part 2 is going to take us straight into the truth Adrian has been hiding. This is Silver S Dramas. I'll see you in part 2.